A story of highs, such as a deep love of professional wrestling from when he was a very young child, and he took that love, that passion, that energy towards the sport of professional wrestling and harnessed it and became so skilled in the ring, and such skills made him stand out in the land of the giants. But unfortunately, we got the lows, such as a very tumultuous relationship with Tammy Sitch. They were high school sweethearts, and then when they got involved in the crazy world of professional wrestling, everything spiraled out of control for a variety of reasons. The drug addiction, my God, the drug addiction. You have to wonder what would have become of Chris Candido's career, and more importantly, his life, had he been able to get a hold of that. Would he have been able to live on past the spring of 2005? Just so many circumstances, so many things. A career in life cut short. Tammy was also along for the ride. I'm Charles Renton with my review of Dark Side of the Ring, Chris and Tammy, the Season 4 season premiere. And my goddamn goodness, if this episode is any indication of what we're in for, oh, it's going to be filled with a whole bunch of emotions, some laughs and a lot of heartache, not even some heartache. My God, I was in tears during this. Whew. So let me know what you guys thought of this episode in the comments, please. I'm going to keep my criticisms of Tammy light, at least for a little bit. I will not lie to you, I will get a little bit angrier later on, but this was more of a celebration of Chris Candido, who really was made for pro wrestling. I mean, even though I really wish, and I know that Vice is having the bankruptcy stuff and everything. Apparently that will not affect Season 4. I hope we get Season 5, if not on Vice, somewhere. But because there's still more stories to tell, and I'm really glad with this lineup. Oof, it's going to be something. And this was a whopper of an opening. Their story basically was like, love and heartache and just crazy kids mixed up in the world of professional wrestling, and everything just spiraling out of control. Like they were made for each other in the beginning, but then it became obvious that things just weren't going to work out, like at fucking all. Talking heads such as Chris's brother, who called him Cook, the mother, Peggy Ray, Jim Cornette, Mick Foley, Terry Reynolds, Dr. Tom Pritchard, Lance Storm. Great talking heads here. Obviously, Cornette played a big part in helping elevate Chris Candido's career as far as running Smoky Mountain Wrestling. Foley was friends with him. Storm worked with him in ECW, Dr. Tom Pritchard as part of the Body Donnas. And Chris loved Tammy. I mean, he loved her. I mean, we find out more as time goes on. This is all in the intro. And then we talk to the brother, or we hear from the brother Johnny. He talks about how Chris made championship belts from an early age and shows all this memorabilia. There was even this like box fan thing, like the dual fan deal that was hung up that was supposed to like cool the room, and he never took it down, even though, because Chris put it up. Like it was like all these drawings, all this stuff, all these pictures. You could tell that Chris Candido loved wrestling. And he had the perfect body for it. I mean, and he had the passion for it. I'm going to say right now that obviously I was not aware of Chris's time in the Independents, or on the Independents. I saw like one or two tapes from Smoky Mountain Wrestling because I had a friend who had an uncle that got tapes and traded with various people from around the country, even from Japan. And he got a couple Smoky Mountain tapes, and I did get to see Chris Candido before he came to WWF. And I thought, even at age, I believe, 13, I was like, this guy's really good. Like, he's really good because, I'd been watching wrestling since 1985, but I was like, oh boy. I was like, well, I said, some of these guys, they're not bad, but this guy's really good. And 13, like, what are you going to say? Like, you see a guy that has that just natural, magnetism, that great physique, and he could pick, that blonde bombshell is incredible to watch a powerbomb off the top. I hadn't seen shit like that, at least on U.S. wrestling. And the one thing about, Johnny, the brother, talking about how, if Chris had been asked, well, you're going to have all the success, you'll be a WWF champion, but you're going to die at 33, would you accept it? Chris would have said yes. The footage the footage of like the independence and stuff like that. That was really goddamn cool. It's great to hear from the mother. Great to hear from the mother. I mean, you could obviously hear the heartache in her voice. You hear the heartache in the brother's voice, and how Chris met Tammy wrestling at a show in high school, smitten right away, and you could see why. You could honestly see why. Chris would be smitten with Tammy. Tammy would be smitten with Chris. They were two young, good-looking blonde people that were just made for each other, at least seemingly were made for each other. The old footage on the indies, that was kind of cool to see. And then Cornette, Cornette had, talked to Chris, because it was during the Dennis Corluzzo era where he had been doing some independent shows in Jersey, I want to say. He was somebody that Cornette and Brian Less had talked about on Cornette's podcast, and Corluzzo was a passionate wrestling fan and did love Candido. Candido was even a former NWA champion. It was kind of funny. I believe Candido told a story about like meeting Lou Thez, and Lou Thez was like, "Oh, is the NWA doing well? And watch out, young man. They may try to double cross you." Because Lou Thez, the fact that Chris Candido and Lou Thez shared like even a conversation is just wild to me, because it seems like Lou Thez would have been around, wouldn't have been around the 90s. Actually, he was. I think he died in the late 90s, early 2000s. But that's a lot of rich history. That was some cool stuff. And Cornette was like, I can't really pay Candido too much to justify moving him down from Jersey to all that. But hey, Tammy, there's something here. Can Tammy talk? She can talk. Chris enrolled in the University of Tennessee, so his mother would be happy he was going to school. The mother didn't get the whole, didn't really seem to get wrestling, but she saw that it was something that his son, or her son rather, was passionate about. He at one point was wearing a baby bonnet and a diaper. I mean, I'm sure that had something to do with him losing a stipulation match. I'm not so sure, because I'm not really that keen on my Smoky Mountain Wrestling history. But Foley weighs in. I believe it was Boo Bradley was the simple-minded character that they had. That was a little bit of footage where they were kind of knocking a guy. And then, Tammy, how Tammy basically would, she nailed these takes and stuff like that. The highly Republican area that is East Tennessee. And they hated the Clintons, so they decided to make Tammy like something like Hillary Clinton, or loves Hillary Clinton, equal opportunity, all that stuff and all that jazz. As somebody that lived through that time, I do remember, a lot of stuff being all over the news and everything, and all over media appearances. And Tammy talked about equal opportunity. People hated her, and Tammy was perfect to be the heel there. She was perfect to do that stuff. Tammy got more over than Chris, unfortunately. Cornette wanted them to succeed, even if it was in WWF, because he had a talent trade agreement with Smoky Mountain Wrestling and WWF. He'd even appeared at the 1995 Rumble with the Heavenly Bodies. He was the American spokesperson for Yokozuna in that build-up to Lex Luger, or to the match with Lex Luger at SummerSlam 93 when they didn't put the belt on him. But Jimmy Del Rey and Dr. Tom Pritchard, they were the Heavenly Bodies. Then, the Body Donnas. This is also during a time when they talk about how Tammy was kind of getting a bit of an ego, and that was, people say it was might say it's a slander. No, Tammy really got a goddamn ego, and she thought she was better than everybody. But the Body Donnas, an occupation gimmick, they were fitness gurus. And Dr. Tom Pritchard had his long curly hair, and he'd shave it and bleach it. It was really no longer than my hair, in all honesty, at some points. And Lance Storm says, I already kind of had the cut. They could have just made me zip, but I'm glad they didn't. And Tom Pritchard's like, it sucked. It was the worst part of my life. At least his career. And that was kind of funny for him to, yell about that. And Terry chimed in, Terry Runnels. And I like Terry. I feel bad for what Terry went through, especially with the plane ride from hell and other stuff she went through, because Terry was all about business. The York Foundation was a pretty underrated stable, even though it didn't last long. Great theme, even though it sounds like the theme from Dallas. But anyway, she talks about how Tammy had great mic skills, and Tammy did. That's the one thing. Tammy did have great mic skills. Most downloaded woman in 1996 on AOL, of course. I believe, what was the quote that Terry said? Back when Christ was born, we had AOL, and believe me, I remember AOL. She's not wrong. That was really ancient. The dial-up. And then she couldn't control her ego. There was a point where the Godwins had, the bucket of slop that they dumped on people. Well, certain things were put in by the guys, possibly shit. Maybe they whacked off. Maybe they pissed in it. Who goddamn knows? But it got dumped all over Tammy. Wouldn't be the last time she was covered in fluids. Don't worry, this is going to get a lot harsher towards Tammy here. And she couldn't control her ego. She started sleeping around with Sean in 96, 97. Somewhere around that. I believe Sean was married at the time, too, to, his first wife. All in front of Chris. Because Tammy was a shit human being. And I just want to say right now that I'm not saying that Chris wasn't a guy messed up because of injuries and because of stuff or whatever, but Chris was the wrestler. Tammy could talk, but Tammy was lucky that she ever got into wrestling. She never really deserved to be in wrestling. She had that natural magnetism, and I guess you wanted to look at her if you liked that sort of thing. But she was an egomaniac and honestly has deserved every bad thing that has happened to her. That includes in the locker room from any wrestlers. And now she killed somebody because she was an out of control alcohol and pillhead. And even though she had gotten numerous stints in rehab that WWE had paid for, what happened? She kept fucking up. And I know addiction is hard to kick. She didn't want to kick it. She just wanted a free ride. And I'm in the Hall of Fame, and then she's knocking all the 2011, I think. And I don't care if you do porn, I don't care if you do that stuff, you get down however the fuck you want, but the fact that she knocked so many other current women or whatever, women that were way more talented in their sleep than Tammy ever was at her best, yeah, it's fuck Tammy such forever. Everybody else already has. Less tread on her than there is on a 10-year-old bald snow tire. So, Cornette says Chris Candido could have beaten Shawn Michaels and shoved his own head up his ass, and that's true. He could have shoved his head up his ass because, and the brother tried to get Chris to leave her because, Chris felt a responsibility because he got her into wrestling. It's who cares? She's here now. But then he broke his neck in Madison Square Garden and then got hooked on somas. And that didn't really help. I mean, he didn't even touch a drink or touch any pills until he went to the WWF. And that was the case with a lot of people. And I believe it with Candido. Look at how he looked. I believe it. But he ended up pissing off some of the key people, i.e. Shawn and WWF. Could you imagine if Candido had been able to, if he had been able to get the time off to get neck surgery and heal up, if he had been able to have matches with Bret Hart? I don't think Bret would have wanted to take the blonde bombshell finish as good as Candido is, but Bret Hart versus Candido, sign me the fuck up. Would have loved to have seen that. Rocky, The Rock versus Chris Candido. If Chris Candido had been able to heal his neck and Shawn hadn't been a pilled out prick, then it would have been swell to see Candido featured well, because Candido versus Pillman, well, Pillman at that point, I don't know. Candido versus Austin. Candido versus a lot of people. Hell, if Candido had continued to wrestle in WWF. Candido versus Kurt Angle in 2000, 2001. Yeah, I think so. It's a real series of what-ifs. But he goes to ECW, which he fit into. The blonde bombshell, top rope powerbomb. Every night. Storm talked about it. It messed up his back. I mean, his back was messed up because of all the bumps he was taking. Wild bumps. And to think, he died at, 33? So, he was still in his 20s at this point. And the doctor apparently thought it was a car accident, or that he was in a car accident. Cornette mentions how most of the guys in ECW broke their bodies and ended up on pills and alcohol, and that's because Heyman, yes, he got a lot of people to give people a lot of memorable moments, but what did he do? He did it because he didn't have the money to pay them, and he just was so motivational. and so many people have died from the ECW roster, or they're barely above a comatose status. Anyway, they briefly mentioned how addiction got bad for Tammy. It got bad for Chris too. Sable overshadows Tammy. If Tammy had been clean, I would have still picked Tammy over Sable, because at least Tammy could talk. Sable couldn't. As Cornette said, I don't know, what they got for putting a live microphone in front of Sable, which should have been 3 to 5 years, which is a great line. Tammy goes to ECW. They skip over the WCW stuff. And WCW stuff, they were there 6 weeks? And Tammy looked awful by that point. Heyman wanted to do a tele video where Tammy talked about her problems. And it was fucked up. Cornette hated it. I had forgotten about that, actually. I had forgotten about that. I do remember seeing it a while ago and being pissed off, but I forgot about it. And just even as a fan, just as a fan of wrestling, I didn't think it was good. And then the domestic issues go off the rails. The brother basically was just pissed. I mean, he was pissed because he wanted he wanted Chris to succeed, or Cook. Heyman had Tammy and Chris use their credit card to run up huge debts to buy plane tickets, but then stopped reimbursing them with cash. They lost their house. They were in massive credit card debt. More people that Heyman ended up using. That's the thing. As great as Heyman is, Heyman also needs to be remembered as a bit of a shyster. So then, at one point, going to get some somas, Chris Candido has a seizure. His brother wanted to ask him a question only he would know, like what day. The paramedics are asking what day it is. Hey, how many times did Ric Flair win the NWA title? And he said 16. Here's the problem with that. If it was by 2000, sure. But if it was before 2000, he didn't, because Ric Flair actually did win a title in 2000. I mean, whatever, it is what it is. I mean, maybe they're just mixing up the stories. Time in Puerto Rico didn't go all that well. It was a lot easier to get pills. Buildings were dilapidated. What? Puerto Rico running shitty wrestling in the same country where Carlos Colon had Jose Gonzalez stab the fuck out of Bruiser Brody? Color me shocked. And then the brother finally got him to clean up. That was a pretty good part there. The brother was very emotional. Then Chris Candido went to TNA. And I remember initially wondering, what the hell? What's he doing there? I go, why is he wearing Terry Funk's old tights? Or maybe I'm mixing that up into WCW stuff. But he was with the Naturals. Chase Stevens and Andy Douglas, who were a pretty good team, actually. Then he broke his shin at Lockdown 2005. He got surgery, was on TV 2 days later. And I want to say they did 2 or 3 TV tapings at the time. They might have done 4. They might have taped them all at that point. And then waited to the next pay-per-view. But then he flew home. You're not really supposed to fly home after surgery. He got a blood clot. This was the tough part, because the mother said she talked to him. And that was the last time, like he was saying, I don't feel good. Well, maybe just rest, honey, and you'll feel better. And that was the last time she talked to him. Dr. Tom Pritchard talked to him on Monday, and then I think he died on a Wednesday. Storm got me. Cornette really got me. It was a blood clot that got from the ankle into the lungs. Combined with pneumonia and all that, they couldn't stop it. That he got clean, and that it was a broken ankle that killed him, and it's just, that was really sad. That was the sad part of it. That he got clean and he got his wrestling life back. He got his life back, more importantly, but he showed that he was still doing good in wrestling. He would have recovered from that broken shin, broken, leg. He would have recovered in 5-6 months. Maybe even sooner. I mean, I don't know. And he died because of a broken goddamn ankle when he got his goddamn life together. Then they showed the 10 bell salute for Candido, brief thing from Impact. What's Candido's legacy? He would have been somebody, he would have been a great trainer. He would have been able to have some great matches. He would have had a new life in TNA. He might even been called back to WWE. Him versus Randy Orton when he was still in his early 30s? Him versus Cena. There are so many great goddamn matches that Candido could have had. And then Tammy getting arrested numerous times because she's a tramp and a trash heap and deserves to die alone in jail as far as I'm concerned. But, yeah, I'm not going to say that Chris made the best decisions, honestly, but he finally did get clean, and he was a natural in the ring, and I really wish that... I don't think he would have been wrestling now. He would have been 48, but he would have been somebody people could have picked the brain of, and he would have been a benefit to WWE, AEW, whatever. Chris Candido, a life well lived, harshly lived. He did get clean. He died clean, but god damn it. Fuck Tammy Sitch, by the way. I mean, everybody else has. So anyway, yeah, that was real sad. God, boy, let's see what next week says on Magnum TA. So let me know your thoughts in the comments. Like, share, subscribe, Twitter handle in the description. I'm John Retlin. I'll see you soon.